Everybody, this week of Cocktails, Code, and Conversation comes up as we're kicking off the Implementer series. And this is a series of interviews that I've done with industry experts within the field that implement identity and access management every single day. And in these interviews, I really wanted to get down into the nuts and bolts of what it takes to really run a successful identity and access management project, and also some of the skills you're going to need to be a good identity and access management implementer. So stay tuned. Hope you get some good knowledge of this. All that's coming up after this break. But of course, you know that this podcast and this episode was brought to you by the On the Corner Podcast Network. Check us out at onthecorner.us. So without further ado, grab your cocktail. Let's get to it. All right, we are back for another cocktail, another conversation, another episode of Cocktails, Code, and Conversation. Another episode, again, without me having a cocktail because it's just been that kind of a day. So I will have one in probably about an hour. Or whenever this conversation is over, actually, I will just go downstairs and make me a nice strong glass of Whistle Pig. Shout out to Mike Kaiser. Thank you so much for that. Trying to make sure that I drink all of that in the next
week. It's a good choice.
Right. But coming up, we have this episode, special guest, because all my guests that come on this podcast are special because they know me. They might regret that, but they do. But this gentleman right here, you know what? I was trying to think about when we actually met. I don't remember. It was just kind of like this. It's like the whole BC thing. It was like, you know, before Jom and then after Jom. I don't remember what life was like before I met Jom. I just know what life is like now.
I think we met when I came down to SailPoint offices, the old one. And I was working with Ross, and we're just walking down the hall. You're sitting there in the room. I just walk in and act like I knew you. We never had a conversation.
That sounds very much like you do, John. I'm probably sure that's what it is.
IAM industry, everyone, it's so small, everyone's heard of each other at least.
This is very true. So for those who don't know who you are, John, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jom John. I'm the founder and CEO of Simplex IAM. I live in Chicago by way of New York, where I grew up. Been here since 2004. Been in the IAM industry shortly after that, and worked with David for several years. That's how I met him.
And he's regretted that ever since. But so the reason why I wanted to have you on this one and why I'm excited to kind of have this conversation is I wanted to kick off this series that I call like the Implementer series. And what I wanted to do was, you know, get people on and have a conversation and talk to people about, you know, what it's really like to be a good implementer when it comes to identity, right? We talk a lot about the complexities of identity access management, all the things that go into it. And I feel like where you see a lot of the same articles and same content that we'll get from, you know, the big four and things of that nature is like, oh, you know, don't boil the ocean, do these things, get executive buy-in. It's like, okay, we've done that. And we've said that a lot to death. And I think people get it. I wanted to, you know, take this time to have some in-depth conversations with people that I know are really, really good implementers. And let's talk about some of the stuff that we kind of really don't get a chance to talk about and walk through that. So that's what this conversation is going to be about. So jumping into it, I would start off and ask the first question, like, so outside of, you know, we'll skip all the big stuff that we know, right? Hey, like, get your executive to buy in, understand that you're going to be doing multiple things. It's a marathon, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But if we step down that next level, you know, from your experience and your expertise, what's the next, like, big thing that you need to do in order to have successful implementations?
So I would say, honestly, my most successful projects, you know, as big as ego as we have, being senior implementers on these projects, what really makes projects successful is the client themselves, their dedication to it, their investment in it. You know, I'll give credit to Andre Bosch at SailPoint, who probably gave me the best quote of what differentiates successful projects from unsuccessful projects. And it comes down to how much is the client willing to invest in this project? You know, if you just have a date in mind, if you say, right, hey, I want this completed in 6 months, well, you just spent 5-6 years implementing an IAM product that's legacy now, and now you want to migrate it to another product, and you want it done in 6 months, and that's your only goal, you're not going to be successful.
Right.
If you invest in, hey, I want to understand my environment, I want to understand my data, my pain points, I want a clear understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish, and have the resources that know what they're talking about. That helps the most because I could walk in, get correct answers to my questions, get clear requirements, and then I can do what I'm good at doing. Then, I can advise you correctly. But if I start out with nothing essentially, and you expect me to come in and in a 1 or 2 week requirements gathering session, fully understand your business, your goals, what
Right.
you're trying to accomplish, your data, especially in a larger environment, you're just setting yourself up for, I'm going to hit a date, I'm going to get you something,
Right.
and then you're probably going to regret that something to an extent. Um, but the clients that really kind of take time to understand what their data, and what they're looking to accomplish, you know, then even then, if you have a very limited time frame, it works well. I had one project that it wasn't crazy complex, but they were being divested. And I walk in the door and they pretty much said, okay, you started today. We have 6 weeks to be in production.
Wow.
um, let's go. But they were prepared. Um,
Okay.
I said, all right, if you want to hit this is everything I need. And they worked around the clock, got exactly what I needed. They got their stuff done and they enabled me to get them in production. And that was probably one of the more successful projects I've ever had, even though I've only had 6 weeks when I started and got access to their environment and had my first kickoff call with them to them being in production.
It's pretty good. So, kind of taking it the next step, what would you say then, for an implementer? So somebody that's, new to identity and they're just kind of starting, their implementation journey. Like what are some of the things, some skills that are important for them to start to develop and things that they need to focus on?
The big thing for me is understanding whatever product it is, what it can do and what it can't do. Clients are always going to ask for everything. Hey,
Yep.
I want it to work this exact way. This is how it worked before. This is how my custom solution built it. And if you try to replicate that exactly, um, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be a successful implementation.
Right.
You kind of have to know, I wouldn't say limitations, but how best to do it within the product you're trying to implement it in. And if it has limitations, be upfront about it. Just
Right.
tell the client, yeah, we could build it this way, but this is the headache you're going to have maintenance wise. You know, Someone else that comes in 2, 3 years down the road is going to look at this and be like, I got no clue how to maintain this. You got to look at the maintenance portion of it too. Um, so that aspect of it, I think, if you're new to implementing, you know, install a sandbox environment, kick the tires, break stuff yourself, figure out what it can do, especially with specific connectors. There's a lot
Right.
of limitations, especially now when I'm working with Azure, AWS, Google, and G Suite. Um, there's a lot of stuff about the SaaS application and the SaaS world in general that just works differently than your traditional on-prem application integrations. There's API limits you have to think about. Um, you can't just solve problems the traditional way. Oh, aggregation or the read process is running slowly. I'll just horizontally scale. I'll add more servers. I'll add more
Right.
partitions. Oh, now G Suite says you've hit the quota. You only read X amount per minute per hour. So you just told this client, hey, I'm going to run this process every 10 minutes, and Google can't support that. So
Right.
you kind of have to understand the architecture of what you're integrating with as well. And that technology is changing quickly. So you have to make sure you're keeping up. Um, what I love about it though is like I can go to ServiceNow, sign up for a dev sandbox, and just connect directly to my own dev ServiceNow sandbox. I couldn't do that with SAP. I'm not going to stand up my own SAP environment.
What are you
But
talking about, Job? You don't have your own SAP environment running at home, right? That's not how you you provision SAP access to people that come through the front door.
yeah, my Epic EMR environment
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well. I can have my physicians play around in. Yeah. Things like that we couldn't do, but with
Right.
Suite, with Azure, with ServiceNow. Sign up yourself for your own environment, AWS. There's nothing stopping you from building your own environment. It's not that expensive. There's free developer environments you can sign up for as well, and get yourself some experience.
So, so on that end, right? So obviously, being aware of, you know, limitations or what the product can and can't do. Talk to me a little bit from about the project management standpoint, right? So there's the technical skills, like the non-technical skills, like project management, things that good implementers need to have.
Yeah, and this goes back to kind of what I mentioned earlier about the client being involved. What I found has been successful on a lot of projects is prior to kind of any user acceptance testing phase in a project, we always, everyone knows the standard requirements, design, unit tests,
Right.
integration, UAT.
Wait, hold on. Unit test? What's that? I don't know what that is. UAT testing environment. I don't. You're speaking nonsense now,
As long as test connection works, you're good.
right? What are you talking about?
But what I found that does help is before you get into UAT, just doing training with the client. Let them be hands-on. If you try to do everything for the client, you're probably just reevaluating your same test cases, your same assumptions. You're saying this is how I think it should work, and you're just walking the client through it, showing them some testing results spreadsheet that says, hey, look, everything works.
Right.
The production is like, oh, well, this isn't how it's supposed to work. This is you missed this. It's like, well, if your client is not involved, um, you know, you could point back to your requirements and design all you want, but at the end of the day, it has to work in the client's environment. And like I said, as much experience as I have, every client's environment is different.
Yeah.
Uh, so you need to have them involved, but you need to train them first. There's a lot of times where, hey, we'll do handover after we get into production. All right, well, you're going to be doing production support then.
Right.
What that means. But yeah, really get the client involved, make sure they have time allocated to it, um, make sure that they get trained so they can adequately do the testing, and then let them struggle at testing. You can jump on Zoom, WebEx, and whatever you want to do
Right.
to walk them through it as they need help, but let them struggle through it in UAT versus them struggling through it once it's in production already.
So I'm gonna kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. So it sounds like you're saying that the opportune time, especially for the clients, to really kind of get them involved, is right in that UAT phase, right? So at that point, it should be less of a, okay, I'm coming in helping them implement. You go through the hardcore development at UAT. Your handoff process should really be starting then, right? To have your client kind of taking it over. Um,
And it's slowly shifting that way to say, once you get to UAT, the client even does the deployment, and then you're hands off. I don't have access to production. In reality, it's not always like that. There's just a lot of complexities that, especially for large phase one initial go lives, you're just going to have to be hands on.
right.
There's no way to be hands off, but definitely involve the client. Don't leave them behind. Show them how to do things. So if not, you're the one that's going to continually be the one that has to do it.
Right.
And it depends on the client team as well. Obviously, you should have touched on that. The client team does have a developer. Give them some task. Let them get some experience writing some code that maybe is standalone. Maybe just a little task here and there, but at least they're getting some experience developing as well.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about client team makeup. So going back to the successful organizations that you've seen with this, where the client's very much involved, they're willing to invest. What does the makeup of their team look like?
Yeah, so there's always kind of the manager, the business owner that you work with, and then under that individual is I would say at a minimum kind of an operations guy and a engineer slash developer slash architect resource. Uh,
Okay.
those two I think are kind of key, and then from there, depending on how large it is, how much services you have in your implementation. If you have critical provisioning services, password reset, things like that. Yeah, you're going to need more. You have a global corporation using it 24/7. You're going to need a larger team. You're going to need a help desk being able to do certain things in your system as well. So the help desk kind of becomes part of your team, at least certain services they're utilizing. So you got to make sure that they're trained and have their SOPs laid out. But in terms of the core team, I find at least, kind of one operations guy that's in charge of builds, patches, infrastructure, restarts, and any application you're integrating with when they go through maintenance. If you have to do something, that operations resource to kind of lead that. And then the kind of engineer architect resource that really looks at, okay, this is what we designed, this is what's in production, this is what we need to tweak. Every single little minor tweak shouldn't have to go back to the implementing company.
Right.
Um, you should be able to have a guy that, or female, I keep saying guy, I apologize for that can handle that development task themselves. And once it starts getting into complex stuff, maybe work through it with them, walk them through, here's my thought process, here's how I would solve this, and then let them do the development to gain that experience. And if it's critical, obviously you have to jump in yourself to get it done. There should always be a warranty period of after go live, 1 to 2 weeks of, hey, we need to fix this. We're not going back. We need to just fix this immediately. As well as your testing and as well as everything is gone, there's always break fixes you're going to have to do in production. Right. Just be prepared for that.
Yeah, so for those listening, we're going to recap. Always test in production, and warranty period of 1 day. No, I think, and I want to come back to that, right? I want to spend some time and really, go into detail about the testing, because I think, and most application development cycles get this, right? We are always in such a rush to ship, right? I mean, we now live in an age of, ship it, right? Like build, break, fix, ship, like just that constant cycle. And while, yes, I love the iterations that we can do, and we can innovate, we can do stuff a lot faster. I don't think we talk enough about testing in that standpoint, especially when it comes to identity systems, because testing can typically be, this isn't the, there's unit testing where you can test like your little individual pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part with identity platforms, right, it's integration testing, right? And it's a lot of that, because this system is coming in, it's connecting to so many different systems, right? So just something as simple as, hey, like, we want to automate when the new hire comes in, when we kick off our joiner, we got to connect to HR, we got to pull that in, we got to make sure the data came right, our rules kicked off the right way to create the role or assign the groups. Then it goes out and provisions to their email inbox, things of that nature. So there's 3 or 4 different systems right there for one simple workflow. Like I just start a new employee, right? And I want to give them their AD account and their email, right? And maybe access to one other thing. There's 3 different systems I got to connect to. And so running through that process is something that really does need to be laid out in the test cases. So talk to me a little bit about from, again, and this is somebody to say, like, if you're a really good implementer, talk to me about some of the things of like a testing strategy that you lay out with your client.
Yeah, I mean, number one, when it comes to testing, every single one of us has run into this is, hey, we don't have a test system. We'll create you this thing in production, and you can kind of fake it, and then once it gets to prod, we'll validate, and then 10 times out of 10 that doesn't work.
It never works.
So the number one rule is always have at least one lower environment that we can test it end to end with. You hit the nail on the head. When it comes to identity and access management, it's integration testing. That's really what it is. Take data from one system, push it to another system at the end of the day. And if that other system doesn't exist, that defeats the whole purpose of an IAM system and having proper integration testing long term.
Stop it. Now you're just talking logically. What are you doing?
That aside, I think in the IAM industry, we are a bit immature when it comes to testing. Over time, we've built some really good test cases and spreadsheets and what we need to do, inputs, outputs, testing cycles. That's all great. I think we're just scratching the surface on automated testing,
Yeah.
um, and repeatable automation testing. I've worked with some clients where we built some good test scripts. They serve well for regression testing purposes, but those need to be maintained over time. And it's never really a repeatable process from one project to the other. So I think hopefully we'll see some more investment on the automated testing side, to make that a bit easier for clients. The Apart from automation, really thorough testing scripts. I mean, I would say a pretty good spreadsheet, that I kind of used from project to project, that's helped. But outlining those test cases and building a test strategy guide to know this is exactly the environment I'm going to do testing in. These are the exact test cases. These are the test case owners who's going to sign off on it, including application subject matter experts as well. Hey, everything was successful through SailPoint, so it must be good. Uh,
Right.
I need that app owner themselves to sign off on it. You have to go into your application and validate. Yeah, I told you this is the requirement, but when it comes through SailPoint, there's some loss in translation. You said X, I did Y. I thought you meant Y, but you really need that, subject matter expert. And if
Right.
there's no subject matter expert, that's what causes issues a lot of times. But making sure, going back to project management, even when you do that kickoff, you make sure to work with the client to say, here's all the resources that I'm going to need from your side. Here's the allocation time. It may not be a lot, maybe 16 hours that I need of an Office 365 SME that can just validate, hey, yes, this mailbox and license got provisioned properly. But without those 16 hours, you may not find that defect out until you get into
Right.
production.
Yeah, and it's always um, a couple of points I want to make. One, it's always found in production, right? Because the data's it's never the same. Even when you get your you know uh, your your UAT system or your backup system, right? The data is always stale or older, things of that nature. But like the more you can get, the better. So that's one thing that I tell people when I talk to them about you know looking at and being successful projects is realize that you know you're not shooting for 100%, right? That there's a 10 to 15% scale there of I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. Like okay, like and just be prepared for that, right? Like you get that one use case where the data comes through and it's like, yeah, the guy was hired and fired on the same day 20 years ago. Like, wait, what? I don't That doesn't make any sense. What is this, right? And it's just how it happens. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's all our secrets of how, yeah, it always about 50% bad data once you get into product. Yeah, your code is not going to account for every data anomaly,
right.
especially in certain sectors like healthcare, who have
Oh,
multiple personas, the worst data. You terminate somebody, but their account has to be left active. It's the wild, wild west.
right.
So yeah, that's one of the things as you get more senior, you realize you just have to get comfortable with it's not going to all work. It's not going to all be clean. It's not going to work exactly. So just make sure you have kind of, as much as you want to be proactive and say everything is going to go through this engine and everything is going to work, kumbaya, you have to have some reactive things in there, building reports to kind of highlight data anomalies and, users who are terminated but have active accounts still remaining, certifications, that
Mhm.
process. You just have to utilize that to kind of close a lot of that bad data out, because you're not going to be able to account for it, especially in certain environments.
Right. And you know what? And the testing side, I think it's interesting because you know part of the reason is a lot of these things are they're still which we call commercial off the shelf, COTS, software, right? Even though it's SaaS now, but it's still this closed kind of system that, everybody's going to do it differently, right? Okta does it one way, SailPoint does it one way, Ping, CyberArk, X, whatever. Name all of them that you want to, but they all implement a certain different way, and there's no standard there. So it's hard to build automated tests for something that's like, well, this is built using, you know, JavaScript and Angular. This is built using Vue or something like that or whatever. And I think one of the things that's interesting that I would like to see is as Skim starts to really kind of take hold now, right? We're seeing it a lot more. A lot of the vendors are picking up the support for it. A lot of them are building more connectors that way. So at least on the connectivity side, and to your point, the data exchange, there's some room there for just kind of automating and looking at some things there, right? So I can kind of build scripts based off of, okay, your Skim classes, show me what your extensions are, things of that nature. I can build test off of the sea of data flow. So that's on one side. I would kind of like to see maybe some standards on the other side. Like if you are, let's just say, look, if you are an IDP, right? So if you're like a Ping or an Okta, right, or whoever else is in there, those are only two I can think of, but whatever. Like there's a certain, let's make a certain set of standards of APIs that will be there, right? So I know that I will kind of get these things, so we can kind of start to building some standard things that you can test for to put out there. I would love to see something like that. Obviously, none of the vendors are going to do it because it doesn't behoove them in any case to do that. But I don't know, maybe that's
Yeah, I mean, I would love standardization. I'll throw out Auth0 as well, give them a shout
there we
out.
go. I knew it was somebody else forgetting. Auth0. Okay, don't kill me, guys.
The reason I bring them up is, I think they did a great job of at least having APIs and an SDK very well documented to put it out there to say, here's our API, go ahead.
Right.
You have access to build stuff against it. And, SailPoint's doing that with their Skim API. And you like to see that with other vendors as well. Standardization across all those products to say, here's our standard for Skim. Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get there.
It's a pipe dream, but it's
Yeah.
okay. I can dream. I'll have it.
Yeah, but I do agree. I mean, at least step one, have an API that's extensible and that I could hook into, because
Right.
then at least I can build something in a standard tool that just integrates with Skim or REST / REST, and your might be a little bit different. So I may have to switch up some configurations,
Right.
but I have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah. So if we move past that, right? Like let's kind of go back to the kind of like the project management side of so managing an implementation project from an implementer's perspective, right? What are some of the things that somebody coming into this say, all right, here are the things that you need to, if you want to be considered a good implementer, right? Here are the things you need to get really good at from managing a project.
I mean, number one is always you have to be able to manage scope. You have requirements, make sure you get sign off. You have design, make sure you get sign off, because once you start getting into development and you get into this, well, I also wanted to do this and that, and oh yeah, you got to set this other attribute. Like it's rare that it is I wouldn't say it's rare, but it should be rare that it's a large change from a scope perspective that
Right.
would make a project unsuccessful or thrown off budget. It's usually death by 4 to 6 hour changes,
Right.
where, and you have to have that relationship with the client as well to say, hey, listen, here's a track of all the things post design that you've asked me to redo or enhancement essentially. Um, and that may add up to, in the spirit of collaboration, yeah, you don't want to change order for every single thing the client wants.
Right.
You should definitely do some things, especially if you missed it. You as providing best practices should have known better. You have to eat that. But at a certain point, you do have to push back. You do have to make sure the client understands this is how much time we've allocated for these tasks. This is kind of the overages so far, justified or not. So when you ask me to make this additional change, this is why I'm saying no. This is why I'm pushing back and saying, is this 100% necessary for the initial go live? Can we do this as a phase 2 or phase 1.5 post go live? Make a prioritization list, make sure to reevaluate that as you get closer to go live, so that once we're live, yeah, I have to do these 4 other things and get this done in the next 2-3 weeks. But if you try to include all that in the project, then you're just gonna start delaying the project.
Right.
Go live dates get pushed and pushed. That's when defects come up because you threw something in minor last minute as a coding change and you didn't thoroughly test it for all the different data scenarios that you're going to hit once you started doing integration testing. And then just as a snowball effect, all because you try to fit in 2, 3 things, try to be accommodating. And like I said, it comes back to that relationship with the client. You have to build that trust and relationship to know that, hey, I'm not trying to nickel and dime you, but I'm trying to make this project successful. And I'm saying no for a reason.
I want to throw a scenario at you, right? And see what your response would be. So you come into a client, right? And they say, look, we're going to bring in, and we've already got everything that we need. And we know what we want to do for our phase 1. Right. And so they come in and say, here's the applications we want to connect to, here are the workflows we want to implement. And you look at it and, you see it and go, okay, some of the things they want to do, I'll make it a really extreme example. So they say, look, we've got 5 applications we want to get to. And, they got to roll this out to like 40 some odd thousand users. We'll keep it fairly small. But the 5 applications they want to do maybe cover like 10% of the user base, right? And the big one they left out is like, oh, well, we're going to start with this first and we'll do AD last, right? We'll do AD in like phase 1.5, right? So I'm just throwing something out there where it's clearly wrong, right? Talk to me about like what your response is to the customer to kind of help them say, okay, hey, maybe we should adjust this plan a little bit.
Well, I try to understand where the client is coming from. And I have 90% of the projects, yeah, you start with provisioning to AD. You integrate with an HR source, you provision to AD. I've had some projects where it's, hey, I'm going to use AD as my authoritative source reading into SailPoint or whatever the IAM product is,
right?
Which is a big no. But you have to understand where the client is coming from first to kind of understand, okay, give them some credit, see why they did their due diligence or they randomly just pick stuff versus, the benefit, like you said, of you're only satisfying 10% of the user population. Why would you prioritize these applications? And you could advise them. But at the end of the day, you do have to trust that the client knows what they're doing, which hopefully they do.
Do you really?
At least let them kind of defend it. But you can't strong arm the client into, no, we're doing it this way. I never like to reinvent the wheel if I don't need to on projects as well. There's a lot of people that I've seen come in, or a lot of projects I've been thrown into where, hey, this was a failed implementation. But even a failed implementation, I go in and look at it and say, okay, well, I could reuse 60-70% of it. I don't need to completely throw it away and redo everything my way. I kind of see some not ideal code, not optimized code, but you know what? It functions. It works. I don't want to spend 3 months rewriting everything when I don't need to. We've already spent a ton of money. But I can fix these 2, 3 things and get you into a really good spot. And then we could kind of reevaluate, what we need to do going forward. Similar to walking into an implementation to, get back to your question the long way. If they say these are the 5 applications, generally I try to advise them, hey, I have to build 5 custom connectors to connect to this versus you paid for this product. Part of paying for any of these products and the huge license fees is the out-of-the-box connectors.
Right.
And if you're not utilizing them, if you're going to start out with, I'm just going to, yes, I spent hundreds of $1,000s in licenses, but I'm going to spend another $100,000 to build custom connectors for 10% of the user population. Yeah, you have to kind of explain that to them a bit, but hopefully the client, once you have that conversation, kind of understands where you're coming from as well and can kind of reevaluate. But you're right. I mean, there are a lot of clients I walk into where it says, this is exactly how I want everything to be done. And I'm like, well, you paid for me as SME in this space. So, I'm going to give you my 2 cents. Whether you want to listen to it or not is another story, but I'm not going to just blindly take it and run with it because ultimately when someone gets upset, you can't just be like, well, I just did what I was told.
Right. And that, I think that is, I think that's the biggest thing that, you know, I would always tell, you know, the implementers that I had underneath that I was working with, or either, you know, mentoring, or if I was on a project and I was leading it, and something I tried to instill in them is that, you know, the client, I, I this is always controversial when I say it, but I was like, the client's not always right. I don't believe in that
No.
moniker, right? So I'm like, that's cool, and you can tell me everything that you want to, but I'm not gonna. I'll listen, but I'm not gonna just do what that is, right? You know, it's. I feel like when you come in, it's your job to look at, assess what they say, and then guide them in the right direction. And sometimes that's the opposite direction of where they want to go, right? It's like, hey, look, I know you really like, you know, getting your thrill, but jumping off this cliff probably isn't the smartest thing to do right now. So how about we not do that and go a different way? And it's I think the what I've seen is the really good, you know, implementers, as you make, um, you know, you make a career out of this thing, is learning, you know, how to guide your customer off those cliffs, right? And teach and educate them about, okay, why this, you know, decision probably isn't the best, and different ways to go about doing it, because you can't back down to just, well, we've always done it this way. Well, that's awesome. You know, there was a whole lot of things we used to do in this country that we always done this way, and we decided, you know, it's probably not the greatest thing to do. You know, things happen, science, like time passes, we find better ways to do things. And so you can't be you can't get into that mode of just like, well, I'm just going to collect a check and go do this, because you're not. I mean, you can, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like, you're not doing your clients a favor by doing that. And I think overall for your career, is as you start to, you know, again, if you're looking to be a top-notch implementer of this, like, you're not doing yourself any favors by doing that either, right?
Experience helps a lot with that.
It does.
You know, being able to tell a client, hey, listen, I know you want to do this, but here's why you shouldn't. You know, here's what I've seen at other clients. Here's what I've seen within your space, on how to integrate with this, a specific way, and why I would disagree with you. That always helps. Having a good group of people around you. You know, if I'm there's hundreds of applications out there, and I don't have experience with every single one of them.
Right.
There's always things, you know, for me that I'm integrating for the first time. Um, I've been lucky enough to have people that I could reach out to, you know, like Bowen, Ross Short. You know, I'll reach out to them and, you know, pick their brain, be like, hey, listen, you've worked with this before, I haven't. Here's what the client wants to do. Does this make sense to you? You know, what are the gotchas that I need to know going in? You know, it goes back to understanding what the application, what the product can and can't do.
Yeah.
And if I have no experience with it, because at some point you're not going to have experience with every single thing, every single version.
Absolutely.
So being able to reach out to people and talk to them, you know, don't be shy about doing that, because if not, you're going to find that out last minute probably, and you're going to be up all night trying to figure out how to fix something, or you have to go to the client and be like, yeah, I know we agree to it, but you know what? It just can't work this way. Um, you know, it's tough conversations that ultimately you're going to have as an implementer. But you know, the fewer unknown unknowns going in, the better.
Right. And that's a, you know, you touched on a key point there, right? You know, don't don't get seduced by the term subject matter expert, right? By meaning is that you have to know everything. No. And you know, that's a it's a broader in the tech field, right? Like, I think the most successful people I've met that are in the tech field, it's not because they know, you know, deep knowledge about everything. They're they do know a lot of things, but they know who to go to ask certain things. They know how to research to go find things, right? You're always going to find things that you don't know, and you can go and pick up that little bit. But being able to say, okay, but I know this person knows this skill. I know this person knows that skill. So one, being comfortable and knowing that you're not going to know everything, right? Don't get, you know, so caught on your ego that you don't reach out and ask people for help and go, hey, I've never done this before, you've done this before, like, you know, what are your thoughts, right? That's really, to me, that's a silent kind of skill that really helps amplify, you know, your career and the things that you can do, because it's like, okay, now not only do I know the things that I know, but I know other people that are experts in something. So now it's like, okay, I've got a great relationship with John, and maybe John's an expert at skim, right? So it's like, hey, I'll know a little bit about it just to get it done, But now it's like, I necessarily don't have to spend the next 30 hours or whatever, just hours and hours trying to become a master at it. How about I just, be buddies with Jom and send him an email every now and then. And then I'm just like, hey, so I got this far, right? So hint for people who listen to this, right? If you're going to implement her, right? You got to put in the effort. I've gone this far to be able to ask somebody that you know an intelligent question like, hey, Jom, I'm looking at this game. I tried this, whatever, and
Yep.
and this isn't quite working. What about this, right? Now it's like, oh, bet. John will kick in and be like, oh, yeah, man. Well, you just got to do this, and this. It's like, all right, cool. Versus just being the person's like, well, I don't want to learn anything, so let me just ask this person. Like, that's never going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, 100% agreed. You have to have some level of understanding before you just say, "Hey, just give me the answer."
Right.
You have to try to understand it first, but then, yeah, obviously reach out. I think collaboration tools have helped a lot. I love Slack.
Slack for the win, baby.
The greatest thing about Slack is there's tons of people that ask questions on there, and I, have nothing to do with it. But you know what? I'm just going to spy in on the conversation,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll run into this, on a project 6, 8 months later. I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember this person ran into this issue. Go into Slack, search for it, try to find the person, talk to them,
Yep.
figure out how they, I was on a project and I think it was right after a patch came out, and I said, hey, we've been running into this issue. This patch just got released today. I went through the release notes, and I found it. This actually fixes the issue we've been running into that we thought we were just a coding or implementation issue, and then we applied it, and then we're good to go. And the IE on that project, the implementation engineer, that was the essay, the solution architect. He was like, "Well, how do you even know the patch came out like today? Like, are you on some notification that you get emails that it came out, and that's how you knew to check it?" I'm like,
Like, nah, just know
no,
everything.
like every single day, I just go into the blog, I just read through it, I look at what's new. It's part of my routine. I mean, having undiagnosed ADHD may help because I can have an hour work call and not like roam around the internet. But on a daily basis, I just kind of check certain things. I read through Slack comments and things like that, and that kind of just helps me just understand things that I may have never worked with before.
Right.
Help me solve problems. You have to put the work in. You're not gonna know everything.
That you are not. And I'm getting ready to put up on here. So I'm going to give my shout out to idpro.org, right? This is, I tell people when people talk to me about like, what are some of the benefits of joining ID Pro? If you're in the identity space, I'm like the Slack channel, like literally get a membership just for the Slack channel, right? If you work for a corporation, you can talk to them to see if they could, either sponsor a membership for you or if they're a corporate sponsor. But idpro.org, what I love about it is that Slack. I mean, there's a bunch of different channels with just experts from all over the place, right? And there's all just random conversations. Hey, I ran into this. Have you ever tried doing this? And to your point, most of the time I'm just going in there scrolling through. Me, John, I like to jump in and stuff. So if there's things I can answer, I'm like, hey, try doing it this way or that. But one that I kind of go in a lot is the OAuth channel, because Justin Richer to me is just like the king of OAuth. I'm pretty sure there's some people that know it. Well, and him and Vittorio from Auth Zero. But I mean, those two guys, man, like I'll just go on the OAuth channel and just read. And whatever they say, I'm like, yep, okay, because these guys spend way much more time with it than I do. But that's a great, so, the little plug there for ID Pro, but that's a great thing, man. Like you hop in Slack channels, hop in, blogs, things like that, like just kind of research and learn. Because especially in this industry, identity is, even though it's small, man, it's so broad. There's so many little things that you're just never going to have the time to know them all to that detailed level. So being able to go somewhere and pick up little tips that'll help you, right? Like, and 6 months down the line, you'll be like, oh, I remember reading something about OIDC and not being able to do this. Let me go back and look that up or ask a question. So, yep. All right. So let's see. What would you tell somebody if you've got a, let's, I won't, I'm laughing because I was thinking about Ross, and I won't pick on him too bad on this one, but let's say, you got a young professional, right? They're, fresh out of college, like somewhere between 23, 26 years old. And they're like, look, this is their thing. They like identity. They want to get into it. What are some of the things that you tell them, to to give them some advice on getting ready to get started?
I would say throw yourself into as many kind of projects as you can. Um, I building up my career to where I am now, there's a lot of stuff where I could have just said, you know what, it's not my job description. It's not. I'm not
Right.
getting paid to help someone complete their project. I got my own project I got to worry about. I never did that. I think a lot of the people I interact with have never done that. And you'll see that as a common thread from a lot of senior people in this space, is that they're the most helpful people as well.
Mm,
I could always go to certain people and ask for help, and they're never going to say no. um, and I think I've been that same way throughout my career, and I think that's helped me get to where I am right now. Experience in this space is invaluable.
right.
Um, so don't ever kind of limit yourself by saying, you know what, I have this one task, this one assignment. I'm just going to work on mine, and that's it. Um, you know, broaden your horizons, do things that you may not have ever done before, jump in and help other people fix their stuff, because ultimately that's going to be more knowledge for you to help you in projects going forward.
Awesome. And do the same thing, right? Keep it going. I think one of the things that you just said that I thought was very powerful is that, you know, you saw people around you that knew their stuff, that were always willing to help. And so therefore partly this is just the person that you are, but therefore but you repeated the same thing because you're like, well, I remember what it was like for me. So now I want to be able to do the same thing and help out. And that is one thing I will say about this community, the identity community is, it can seem intimidating. Like people know a lot of stuff, but for the most part, everybody is super helpful and willing to help you out. Except for me, I am the lone exception. I will not help you if you ask me questions. I would like, I don't know, leave me alone. And I will delete your emails. This is what I do. So I'm an asshole. It's all right.
But you always pick up the phone when I call.
Only because it's you, John. Only because it's you. Like that's what caller ID is for. And I'm like, oh, okay, John, I'll pick up the phone.
Yeah.
No, so with that, man, we're gonna wrap up. I like to end every section with the same questions I like to ask all my guests that come on, and so I call this section the last sip. So we're gonna get to that in just a minute. Okay, now normally what would be happening is we would have been sipping on the cocktail this entire time. It's winding down. We get to the last sip. At some point, for all my listeners that have been following, I'm gonna get back to having the cocktails. I know. I'm just blaming everything on Corona. So there you go. Corona messed up everything. So and now that I do these interviews at crazy different times, I just don't want you guys to know how much of an alcoholic I am. So there you go. Live with it. Just living in my truth. Don't hate me for it. But no, I'd like to end all the podcasts with the same question. So, John, what do you want your legacy to be?
Um, that's a tough one.
Gets
Uh,
everybody.
I would say I would like my legacy to hopefully be that, I was very collaborative. Um, Anyone that ever needed assistance with something, whether it's helping get on a project because you were furloughed or let go, whether it's a minute technical question, whether it's, hey, I just need a second set of eyes to take a look at this for me, um, that they never hesitated to reach out to me, that they were comfortable reaching out to me for help. So that I'm hoping will be my legacy, that I was just there essentially.
Right. Okay. And I can say he's well on his way to doing that because since that fateful day when John just walked throughout the hallway and walked into my office or wherever office I was in, you know what, we just been really cool ever since. And whether it's just a simple email or catching up, or whenever when the world was right and I was traveling in Chicago and I would just randomly hit you up, right? It's always been awesome just kind of catching up with you and just always willing to like, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. And so I appreciate that. I really do. I appreciate that level of friendship we've been able to build. And the fact that I can call you and ask you stuff and you actually answer the phone, which is awesome because most people don't answer the phone anymore. It's how people are. It's probably because they see that I'm calling and I got some crazy idea that I want them to do. or like I'm on a podcast like this one. But no, man, definitely appreciate you coming on. I definitely appreciate all the insight, the wisdom you've given here. I want to definitely kind of keep this going and inspire people that are listening. If you've been thinking about having a career identity or you're just getting started in identity, keep going, right? Pick up your skills. This is an industry that is growing. We need more, young, innovative minds and thoughts and diversity in thoughts, right? One of the things that I think for this industry, even though it's young and the industry has made a lot of strides, we're kind of getting to the point where, we got a lot of, get off my lawn people like, oh, well, we kind of do it this way. And it's like, I sense a little bit of that coming. So we need some people to come in and shake it up a little bit. Right. And, push the innovation, push on some of these vendors to start doing things differently and start rethinking how we go about identity going forward. So thanks, John, for coming on, dropping the knowledge, man. And for everybody else out there, you know what time it is. To the next cocktail, to the next conversation. You guys stay safe out there.
Thank you for having me, David.
Thanks for listening to Cocktails, Code, and Conversation. Of course, this episode is brought to you by the On the Corner Podcast Network. Check us out at onthecorner.us. Also, please like, rate, subscribe, follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Or if you're watching on our YouTube channel, go ahead, subscribe, click the button to get the notification anytime there's a new podcast coming out. Of course, there's also more great content coming as well. Please check out the C3 merchandise store. You can go to c3.onthecorner.us to check out all of our merch. You can get a nice shirt like this and also your official C3 Squad member shirt. Just go ahead and sign up for the C3 Squad and check out our merch store. So with that, y'all know what it is. To the next cocktail, to the next conversation. Stay safe out there.